Hi, Sarah Spain here on behalf of Gatorade and ESPNW for a continuing content series, Women in Sports. I'm about to be joined by two powerhouses. Dr. Nicole LaVoi, director of the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport at the University of Minnesota, and Angela Ruggiero, CEO and co-founder of Sports Innovation Lab. We got a Hall of Famer on our hands here. Angela is a Hall of Famer in the Hockey Hall of Fame and the USOPC Hall of Fame, a superstar athlete, one of the greatest hockey players of all time, now turned businesswoman and founder. And Dr. LaVoi is a leading scholar on gender, leadership, and women's coaches. She's been published in over 100 book chapters, research reports, and peer-reviewed articles across multiple disciplines. Don't know how we're going to keep this one tight because you guys have so much to talk about and you've accomplished so much. But Nicole, I want to start there with your foray into academia, because you were a tennis player in college. You went to a kind of standard follow-up of coaching after that. When did you realize that you wanted to get into research and academia to help promote and support women's sports?
It was when I was a head coach at Wellesley College, and I really became interested in the intersection of gender research and sport because of the Wellesley Centers for Women. And it was at that time that I realized I wanted to make a difference in the lives of millions of girls and women in and through sport instead of just one team at a time. So I retired from coaching to pursue my graduate degree, which led me to be the now director of the Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sport. I also serve on a lot of boards around the industry related to women in sport.
And certainly on those boards and in other spaces, that research is huge because we are learning more and more the power of data to change the minds of folks when it comes to girls and women in sport, more so than just a lot of the subjectivity that used to be the primary focus of those debates and conversations. And speaking of data, Angela, you are bringing it with Sports Innovation Lab. But before we get there, we have to go back to when you first realized that something would have to come after hockey. You had an unbelievable Olympic gold medal winning career. At what point did you start thinking about what would come after your playing career?
Yeah, thanks. I think I always knew hockey was my first career, and there would definitely be a second career. I was always, trying to figure out what was next. What was my second passion, if you will, besides hockey? And so I was always looking at things, volunteering, sitting on boards, just trying to get my hands dirty, if you will, in the professional scene. But it really came when I retired. I went back to business school at Harvard and was looking at, the sports industry, and natural fit for me to go back and think about applying the same rigor and how I approached my hockey career, but do that on the business side of sports this time instead of just as an athlete.
Well, real quick then, let's tell people what Sports Innovation Lab does and why it's filling a hole in the business space.
We're a fan intelligence company. We're looking at fan insights, how fans behave, where they're spending their time, money, and attention. And if you can actually understand that consumer, that fan, then you're going to be in a better position to drive revenue, to find partnerships, ticket sales, service those fans in a way that they want. And, as you know, we've done a lot of work in the women's space showing that there's actually a big market for women's sports, but the industry hasn't really been paying attention. They haven't been able to see that consumer demand. And so that's some of the things we do with the data.
Nicole, you've been on this train for a long time with your research, and I wonder for you what the best part of your job is, the multifaceted nature of it, but when it comes down to it, what do you like most about what you do?
I like everything about my job. I think I'm one of those, I don't say rare people, but I know a lot of people who really do not like their job. And I really love my job because of the multifaceted things that I get to do. I get to teach, mentor, especially next gen young women coming up who want to make a difference and create systems change for women in sport. I love coaching coaches. I do a lot of coach education. Similar to what Angela is doing on the business side, we do a lot of research to let data tell the story to drive systems change. So that is one of the things I love about my job. And maybe my favorite part, or one of my favorite parts, is that I get to meet amazing women who also care very deeply, present company included, about creating systems change for girls and women in sport. In higher ed, in the industry, and in sport organizations around the world. So there's very little that I don't like about my job.
Angela, how about you? You're in addition to running Sports Innovation Lab, you're on a ton of boards, and you're now being tasked with introducing all of this insight to so many different new spaces. What's your favorite part about what you're doing now?
Well, being an entrepreneur, I love that you get to create things. You get to have, in some ways, outsized impact by, creating things like the Women's Sports Club, as you mentioned, or developing research that changes hearts and minds, or building custom strategies for brands or teams. Like, I was an athlete, you fall down, you got to get right back up. You get told no a lot when you're building something and creating a space that no one can see, but through time, I love working with my team. I love working with the clients that we work with. You got to be persistent and tough. It reminds me a lot about being an athlete, why I think a lot of ex-athletes would be phenomenal entrepreneurs, because you got to see a vision, the future, in a lot of ways, believe in yourself, and be okay with falling down and learning on the fly.
What's your best advice to them about working in sports, whether specifically your career or others?
My dad told me, I remember I got cut from a boys team when I was 9 years old because I was a girl. And he just said, Angela, you got to be twice as good to make that team next year. You got to be the best player on the ice. And so I go into almost anything with that little bit of a chip on my shoulder.
Nicole, I've been saying lately, not quite just follow your passion, but find where your passion and your skills meet. I think that's really important advice to people. What would your advice be to girls and women who want to get into sports?
My advice would be to don't let others get in the way of you pursuing your passion, but have your passion be something do something you're good at, that you could make a living doing, and that really helps create change in the world. I think there's kind of that fourfold thing about not just pursue your passion, but have some other dimensions to that.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that I find with young women athletes is that they often don't think, and Angela's been talking about this, that our skills as an athlete translate into a job, into other contexts, and we have to be explicit about that. So show up, be confident, use your skills as an athlete, use failure as a learning, be relentless in your pursuit of your passion.
We talk about that a lot at ESPNW. 94% of women in the C-suite of major companies in the U.S. were athletes at one point. Those skills translate, and you're going to get out in the world and realize what being an athlete means to you in the boardroom and other spaces. You two are shining examples of that, and thank you so much for joining this Women in Sports content series with ESPNW and Gatorade. We appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thanks, sir. Hey, and you're a role model.
Thank you.
You're freaking amazing. I love what you do. Keep doing what you're doing, because
mutual
you're
love
setting the
fest.
stage for the world. So
Thank you.
keep it up.
Agree.